Right, good morning. I'm just going to share some slides. It's not going to be death by PowerPoint, but I really just want to get a couple of slides up, just really to prompt me and to prompt some discussion. But I'll keep coming in and coming out of them. Can everybody see that? Just give me a thumbs up. Yeah, fabulous. It's always nice when it works. So my name's Lorraine George, and I'm going to leave your introductions to, about each other just for a little while, if that's okay, because it fits in better with an activity I think that might be more useful. So my name's Lorraine George, and I'm the Learning and Development Officer for Generations Working Together. So pretty much my post is very much around training, people in the one-day intergenerational training course. I'm also a tutor on the international certificate course. And then I also work with other organisations developing additional types of training. And mine is a 3-year post, so I'm 1 year in already. And as a consequence of this first year, we've actually got a primary school, an intergenerational primary school module that is being piloted at the moment. And then my remit for next year is to start developing one for young people in secondary schools so that they can become a bit more confident in developing intergenerational work in their own community. So my remit is quite wide. And to support really, one of the biggest questions I get asked on training, one of the most questions is around monitoring and evaluation. And I always feel it's a bit like maths. People tend to sort of fear it or don't think they're going to be any good at it, or think that it isn't something that they can do. So that's really what we're going to have a discussion around this morning, and try and maybe unpick some of the tools that work for some of you, and things that may work for others. And I'll do a bit of signposting because there are some really excellent resources out there that will help with your monitoring and evaluation of any of the work that you do. So updates first of all. So we have got, and it's just been announced the end of last week, GWT has been awarded some lottery funding, and part of the lottery funding is to develop intergenerational hubs, one in Scotland, one in England, and one in Northern Ireland. So there are 2 new posts coming up with GWT. So I wanted to flag those up, so that you can share them amongst your colleagues. One is as a development worker, around supporting the hub and the development of projects in the community. And the other is a communication and digital marketing officer. So somebody that can really be focused on getting the message out, but more using a variety of different ways, maybe sort of more social media. I'm also flagging up the Excellence Awards. So the Excellence Awards are now open, and they close for nominations on the 13th of December at 12 o'clock. So please have a look at the website. You can nominate yourself as part of your project. You can nominate another organisation within your community or a partner organisation. And this year, excuse me a minute. This year, the categories for the awards are all now linked in to the quality standards, primarily to raise awareness about the importance of understanding what quality looks like in intergenerational work. So the categories are very different. So if you've maybe looked at it in the past and thought it wasn't for you, do have a look and see where you might fit in. And like I say, please share them. It might be that you haven't got anything up and running at the moment, but please share them in your organisations. And the award winners will be announced at the conference on March the 8th. So pop that date in your diary. It's going to be our first face-to-face conference in, I want to say 2 years, because I think we had it just before we locked down for COVID. So March the 8th, bear with me a second, let me just let a couple of people in.
Lorraine, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. I'm going to have to leave the meeting. I'm so sorry.
No problems, don't worry. I'll video it and I'll post it up with the slides.
Oh, thank you. Sorry about that. Thank
No
you.
trouble, don't worry. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Bye.
Welcome to the people that we've just had a couple more people join us. Just really going through some updates. So new posts, excellence awards, the GWT conference, which is in the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow on March the 8th. And then I just wanted to flag up the training. As members, you are eligible, it's free for everybody living in Scotland, and as members you can access the free online introductory modules. So if you're looking for something that will give you a really good overview of intergenerational work, or if you're completely new to intergenerational work, I really recommend them. You can also use them if you've got a member of staff maybe that's going to be supporting intergenerational work in your organisation, then you are welcome to use those modules as part of the induction process. It might also work for volunteers. So, you know, they're there and people only have to join as members. I'm going to recommend one in particular that's relevant to today's discussion, which is the measuring impact of intergenerational work. And it was written by Ali Summers, so Ali Summers is a research evaluator of specifically of intergenerational projects, and she wrote the module for us, and it is excellent. I can always say that when it's not something I've written. It is excellent, and it's definitely worth having a look at it. The other thing I'm flagging up is some of the dates. I've added some dates for 2023 excuse me, onto the website already, and there'll probably be about another 10 dates to go on for the rest of the year, and we'll focus on areas that I haven't been in this year. If you particularly feel, you know, that you've got a lot of partners in your area that you feel would really benefit, and you think, you know, that you could fill one of the sessions, then please ping me an email. Equally, you know, we're always looking for free venues in exchange for a funded, you know, free training place. So if you sort of think, well, actually, we haven't had this in our area for ages, please email me and let me know. And if you can offer a venue, that would be great as well. And then lastly, I'm flagging up the International Certificate in Intergenerational Practice, the new ICIP course. So it's running at the moment. It finishes in 3 weeks time, but the new course actually starts in May, 2nd of May to the 26th of June. Excuse me. And if you haven't had a look at the ICIP, do go on and read the blurb around it. If you're going to be undertaking a lot of intergenerational work as part of your job or as part of your organisation, it's definitely worth looking at the ICIP in terms of widening your knowledge. It has 3 really good modules. One is around an overview of intergenerational work. The second is around how it fits in terms of community and what might it look like. And then the third module really focuses on monitoring and evaluation, because it is so important that we all get better at monitoring, evaluating our work. Oh, I hope my voice holds out. So I'm going to turn this off. And if everybody's happy just to sort of share their name, their organisation, and what part of the country you live in, and whether you currently monitor and evaluate your work, that would be really helpful. Let me just stop sharing. Does anybody want to go first? I don't want to chuck anybody under the bus.
I don't mind going first.
Lovely, thank you, Lindsay. So, yeah, name, organisation, where you are, and then whether or how you currently monitor and evaluate.
Yeah, so my name's Lindsay. I work with Dundee United Community Trust, and we're currently doing intergenerational work with between our Still Game group and the local primary school. So that's ages like 60 plus for our group, and then we're with the P45 group, which is ages like 9 and 10. And I know, so I'm quite new to the role, and this is the first time that I've been doing intergenerational work. I know that we have done monitoring in the past, but I've not been involved with that, so I couldn't quite tell you how we do it. But yeah.
Who did them? Do you remember who the monitoring fell to in the past?
I could probably find out, but I can't think of who.
No, I just wondered if you knew whether it was internal or external.
It would have been internal, yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Lindsay. Who wants to go after Lindsay?
I can go. So I am Megan. Hopefully I remember everything that you said, Lorraine. I'm Megan. I work for Stand International, and I'm based in Kirkintilloch. But we work all across Scotland, and basically our organisation works with people who have faced disadvantage that are from Scotland, and then we train them up to become volunteers, and then we take them abroad on a few different projects. So in 2022, that's the year we're in, I'm already like in 2023 in my head, we went to Ghana and we went to Romania, but in the past we've worked in Georgia and Belarus and Ukraine, so a lot of different countries, and I have been in this post for almost a year, so I've not done any monitoring and evaluating. I am kind of in the process of doing that right now, but it's always been internal in the past. It's never been external, and usually the way we do that is partly because of our funders, and partly for our own kind of processes and just seeing what works best and what doesn't work as well.
That's great. Thank you, Megan. Who wants to go next?
I'll go.
Lovely. Hi, Bella. Nice to see
Hi
you.
there. And you. I'm Bella, and I work at one of the development workers up at the Volunteer Centre, Western Isles. We've had quite a few intergenerational projects going on, and especially before COVID, and ran over one particular class in the school. We did it once a month. This is over a year. However, we've got a new care home opening here in the beginning of the year, and they've just put activity coordinators in place to develop this. So I am now kind of passing the links I have with the school onto this activity coordinator, and we're meeting with the school and the activity coordinator on Tuesday next week to go over just how we kind of set up the intergenerational projects, and how, you know, like see if they want to do it over a term, 2 terms, you know, a month or whatever. But they'll probably just start off slower, and then to show them how we did our setting up and evaluating. When we did our evaluating, we took somebody from each strand of it to evaluate. So we had a pupil, we had somebody from the centre, we had the manager from the centre, we had a teacher and myself, and just kind of then picked up on how we could have done better for the next time, and what worked really well. So it's kind of a trial and error, kind of as you're going along. It's, but the first time we did the intergenerational work, it was very ad hoc, and then as we did more of them, we realised that it is better to have a more structure in place. Yeah, so we're learning all the time with it, to be honest.
No, absolutely, as are we, Bellan, you know, and this is the thing, is that we're all doing different things. So it's always a really good idea just to sort of share what we're doing, because I don't think anybody now has got time to reinvent the wheel. You know, so somebody's found, you know, a really great way of evaluating that, you know, all the stakeholders in the project can do, you know, then it benefits everybody. I'm just trying to see, Linda, do you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Linda. I work at Smiddybury Care Home. It's the ages range there from actually 52 to 101 at the moment. But I'm a social care worker, but I work in a core group too, which does activities. And before COVID, we had lots of groups coming in, and we're just starting up again, but the local nursery comes in and we do things. We probably haven't documented things well in the past. We've just written it up on Daily Log, special little meetings, but nothing documented really well, really, I don't think. But it works really well.
Good, good. And I think, you know, what's been really lovely for us, and I'm sure Lorraine will agree with me, over the last few months, it's just been so great. There's been such a resurgence of people starting to reconnect, you know, either that their partner is now feeling more confident, or maybe there's somebody new that's come into post because the old person that always knew how to do it had left, and now there's somebody else. So there's been a real resurgence. So now is a really good time to be thinking about actually how can we monitor and evaluate what we're doing. Lorraine, do you want to introduce yourself and sort of add anything?
Yeah, so I'm Lorraine, and up until this month I was also working with GWT. It feels very odd to think I'm not saying GWT. Well, I am. I'm still part of the networks, and I'm still working on intergenerational work, but not in the capacity that I was before. So I have been involved in a project down in the Borders, which was an intergenerational project around gardening and growing, and that had to start over COVID times, which was extremely difficult in a brand new school that was just opening over COVID times, and a 3 to 18. So Lorraine, I was picking her brains quite a bit around how do we approach a good way of trying to do monitoring and evaluation in this, when it was forever shifting sands, really. So it was an ongoing process that just had to keep on adapting again. And that project is now, you know, being taken over at the school itself in order to keep going. But alongside that, I also did another project around play and storytelling across all generations. And that has had a pilot in with a care home, and it's about to have a second pilot doing that as well. So that was using a new guide that we've created, Generations Working Together in Play Scotland. And it's there for everybody to use. You'll find it on the website, and a whole suite of resources around that. But this was really trying to bring it into sort of a practical level and encourage that first steps back into reacquainting those in the care home staff-wise with those in the local schools, etc., and trying to rebuild into some intergenerational work. So part of that is obviously also giving top tips on how to monitor and evaluate it, and in ways that will work for them. And I think that's, as you said, Lorraine and Bill-Ann were saying, it's an ongoing process, finding the ways that work best for you in any particular project or setting, and how you can manage that. So I'm here just listening to a bit of a guru, and picking up a little bit more to share, hopefully.
I think it's worth pointing out that as part of this wonderful storytelling resources, you used a lot of case studies as part of your evaluation to sum up impact and what happened. And we're going to be looking at sort of case studies as a way of capturing impact and change. And it's one of the challenges we have because we're really focused on relationships, is how do we capture that? And invariably it's only through narrative, and sometimes we need to be a bit more creative in terms of how can we measure and impact change. Lindsay, did I give you the opportunity to share where you are? I can't remember, sorry.
Yeah, I was the first to go.
Fabulous, thank you. Right, I'm just going to put the slides back up. So I just wanted to share this slide, and I know I've used it before back in April, so some of you may have seen it before. During COVID, GWT received a pot of money that was really focused on supporting care homes in Scotland to reduce isolation and loneliness. And as part of the evaluation that we carried out with all the care homes, and there were over, I think it was just under 800 at the time, is we collected some data around that to really inform the fact that we needed a care home network. So this has been set up as a response to this pot of money. And I just wanted to share these two slides. So the first slide shows what percentage of the care homes were actually involved in intergenerational activity. And it was 600, so 58%. But what's really interesting, if you look at the next slide, is how many of those care homes or the people involved or maybe facilitating those activities had actually received training. And it's much higher, it's only 86%. And without training, people tend to be far less confident in thinking about how can I monitor and evaluate? How can I show the impact of what we're doing? And there are so many reasons why we need to do this. But yeah, it seems to be something that people are generally not quite confident in doing, or they don't want to put their hand up as the person to do it. So I just wanted to share that. And we're really on a bit of a mission around joining other countries in flagging up the importance now of capturing impact and monitoring and evaluating their intergenerational work. Because without being able to flag up the impact of what we're doing, it makes it so much harder to receive funding, to ring fence time, to find the resources, to talk your manager into giving you a half day to deliver something. All of these little things which will be really important within your organization. So we are really on a bit of a mission in raising awareness and building people's confidence that they actually can monitor and evaluate their own work. And I just wanted to, as part of that, to bust some myths about evaluation. So people often think evaluation can only be carried out by independent organizations. And they're usually universities, and you have to have a decent amount of funding to pay for them. But actually, evaluation can be carried out by everyone. And it's so important. There is such a wide variety of tools we use. And Belan was saying that they used one of their pupils to evaluate. They used one of their volunteers, I think she said, and a member of staff. It's really important that we start discussing monitoring evaluation at those initial conversations right at the very beginning of our planning, rather than leaving it to the end, which it often invariably does, because generally nobody wants to do it. Evaluation and monitoring tools are complicated and costly. And again, that's not true. Evaluation and monitoring tools are simple, easy to use, and for most part free. Most of the evaluation and monitoring tools are available as downloads. Some are in the resources section of the GWT resource library. And if there's anything you particularly need, or is there something that you're searching for, email me. And if I can't find it, if I'm not aware of it, then I can ask that question amongst our colleagues in terms of where could we find it. But they are really accessible and so easy to use. And other than maybe a mobile phone to film or take photos, most of them are free to use in terms of equipment. And again, there is this myth that we only think about evaluation at the end of our project. But actually, if we don't think about it and discuss it in the planning stage, how do we know what outcomes we're actually looking for in terms of monitoring and evaluating? And if we don't know how we're going to monitor and evaluate, how can we then evidence what's happened on the back of the piece of work that we've done? So I've got some hopefully helpful definitions, just so that everybody is aware of what we all mean by these phrases. So evaluation is using information to make a judgment. And it is also around giving value to what's taken place. And evaluation can be done internally or externally, particularly if you're working with volunteers. Impact, when we talk about impact, we're talking about the contribution that these activities have made to your community. And what have the benefits been? How maybe there's been specific benefits to certain individuals. Maybe it's been to an organisation or a community, or maybe it's actually wider than that. For example, maybe some intergenerational projects are really focused maybe on reducing the attainment gap, which obviously has a huge effect, not only on the community and the individual, but on Scotland as a nation. And then when we think about monitoring, we're talking about the regular recording of activities that take place in a project or programme. And often monitoring is where we can introduce data in a really simple way, which can then add on to the additional types of evaluation that we do. So for example, if we were running an activity session and we just wanted to know whether the children or the young people that had been involved had felt that they'd enjoyed the activity. So something at a really simple level, we could put red or green pebbles or red and green buttons, and we can just ask them to put a green button in the pot if they enjoyed it, if they felt that this was what was achieved, or a red button if they didn't. And the best thing, in my opinion, as an early years provider and as an early years practitioner, is that children, particularly early years children, but children and young people generally, you know, if you ask them whether they've enjoyed something, they'll be honest. You know, if they think your session is rubbish, they'll tell you. And I always see that as a real positive, because then I find out much earlier on in the project that I'm supporting that maybe we're not quite on track and something needs tweaking. So you're monitoring, excuse me a second. So the monitoring, and often we sort of can get a bit anxious about having data, but if we use something like monitoring, we can then be using phrases like 95% of the participants felt that this was achieved or enjoyed the session or felt that they were less lonely as a response. So monitoring, whilst we can get really caught up in the evaluation, the monitoring is really key as well, because that often gives us an opportunity to start thinking about and collecting data. And often with funding bodies, it can be hard to steer them away from data sometimes. So why do we need to monitor and evaluate our intergenerational work? As practitioners, it really provides us with an opportunity to reflect on our existing intergenerational practice. If we don't monitor and evaluate, how do we know that what we're offering is of quality? And if you're working with either staff from other organisations, whether it's schools or staff in care homes, it's always good to build in some sort of feedback so that people can then give you an independent feedback around their perceptions as to what's going on. And as somebody that's maybe facilitating those sessions, we get really caught up in the practical. How long have we got? What's our aim? Have we finished this by the end of the time? We've also got to tidy away that actually we maybe don't put, we worry less around actually are we offering quality? And that's always a good task to hand to people. And I think, you know, we need to really encourage people to be honest, whether it's that they felt maybe that something would have been better if we delivered it slightly different, or if the session was longer, or maybe there were too many people in it. So that's the sort of things, if we're passing, or if we're encouraging other people to give us feedback, it really does give us an honest view of what it is we're offering in terms of quality. We also need to make sure that we're meeting our aims. So for example, if we were running a project and the aim was to reduce loneliness, we need to think, actually, how can I capture that? So it's always important to make sure that the tools that you're using for monitoring and evaluation will give you the information you need to determine whether you've met your aim. So, for example, if one of your aims is to increase loneliness or reduce something, then that suggests there needs to be a measurement built into your monitoring and evaluation tools so that you can then evidence that you have reduced something or improved it or raised the attainment and so on. So it's really important that when we're phrasing the outcomes that we're looking for, our potential outcomes, that our evaluation and monitoring tools that we use give us an opportunity to show whether we're going to meet these. And they are generally linked. So it's really important that not only do you have a clear outcome, but that you're using the appropriate monitoring and evaluation tools for it. We've said that also we use evaluation to provide feedback, and for me as a practitioner, as an early years practitioner, I always try really hard to make sure that we gather feedback from children and young people, because so often these projects are done to the group, and maybe we maybe haven't gone in a very inclusive way in terms of who are we involving. Maybe we're involving the best behaved children. Maybe we're involving the more predictable residential adults, maybe in a care home, and maybe those that maybe need less staff to support. So it's important that we gain that feedback so that it provides us with opportunities to look at things like inclusion. How are we inviting people to participate in this project? Are we fully inclusive, or actually are we limiting? Is it limited to one class, one group? And so on, and in which case it provides you with an opportunity to think about why is that important, and what is the detrimental side of limiting the participants that are going to be involved. And it may be financial, it may be resources, it may be you can only fit 6 people in a minibus, but we need to evaluate right from the beginning in terms of how are we choosing our participants, what information are we sharing with them. And also as well, if we're looking for volunteers, if we put that notice in a library, we're going to get very different volunteers than if we put it on social media. So we also need to think around that inclusivity in terms of information and how accessible that information is to make sure that we have a really diverse range of participants and supporters as part of the project. We also need to evaluate our work because it secures our time and resources. I come from a local authority background, and I had to provide a reason to my manager as to why one day a week it was really just focused on intergenerational work. And if I hadn't have been able to show impact, there would have been other priorities that may have been judged as more important. So it's so important to start monitoring evaluation so that you can then go back to management and say, this is the difference it makes. And it enables you then, it gives you a bit more emphasis when you're fighting all these other priorities, particularly in education, when there are so many priorities. We also need to show our benefits, the impact and the difference this project has made. And then lastly, and last but by no means least, it enables us to give value to what we do. And value is very different from making a judgment. Particularly with the staff that are supporting projects and volunteers, and for the participants, if we're saying this is what has happened as a result of it, it gives everybody that immediate feedback that it has been of value to take place in this project. We also need to really start thinking about busting that myth that intergenerational work is just a lovely thing to do. Intergenerational work is an essential thing to do, and it can be used as a targeted approach, but we need that data to be able to ring fence that time and to secure our resources to keep on being involved in delivering it. So my question then is, how can evidence be collected, and how do you measure the impact of intergenerational practice? And I'm just going to stop sharing. Excuse me. So if we think about monitoring, first of all, what simple monitoring tools are people aware of or have people used that have enabled you to monitor the effectiveness maybe of the activity or the sessions? And remember, with monitoring, we're maybe doing this much more regularly, so it can give us a steer on whether we're heading in that right direction.
I use Google Forms quite a lot because then it
Okay.
can kind of bring things together quite easily. But I'm aware that like a lot of our volunteers might have kind of literacy issues and things like that. So in the past, we kind of done stuff, which I'm kind of just reading about at the moment, as kind of like when we go abroad, drawing a map of where we were and then putting a cross of where was a good place and where was a bad place, and then just having more conversations. To be honest, I think it's more conversational with our volunteers than anything else, just because it's an easy way to get the feedback.
Yeah. And that's absolutely not a bad thing, Megan, capturing that anecdotal feedback. And I would always encourage everybody to capture those anecdotes, particularly maybe the stuff that comes outside of the session. You know, that feedback that tends to come when you're setting up or you're tidying up or people are in the queue for a cup of coffee. Those are often the nuggets that you really want to capture, because people are more relaxed and generally more honest. So, you know, the anecdotal feedback is absolutely really important. What other things have people used in terms of monitoring?
We've used video with, you know, using with permission.
Okay.
We've had video at the beginning and at different activities that we've had, and that's where we've seen the benefits to the older folk, but mostly the students, the pupils, especially pupils who are one or two that we picked up on the last time who were disruptive in class, and they were really focused. And I don't know, was it just that the old folk couldn't walk away from them when they were, you know, and they had their undivided attention, but that's what we picked up on our video, kind of, you know.
And how did you, so was it somebody's task, Bellan, to go through the footage?
We did that as a group. Well, teachers and myself did that as a group, and also as the manager of the centre that we go to, he feeds back monthly as well, even if you don't ask it and ask from him. And it's quite often that the conversation around the lunch club is tenfold on the days after the children have been, you know. So we just kind of, anything that's said, we just kind of keep a note of it and things like that, and then just put it all together at the end.
So there's two things there I want to pick up on. So attendance, so you said your attendance increases. You know, don't forget attendance is a monitoring tool. You know, if you've gone from maybe, and you felt it was like pulling teeth trying to get people involved, and now you've got a waiting list, you know, that speaks volumes in terms of something that is your community then feels is really timely and relevant to them. So that's the first thing. You know, don't forget your attendance sheets. They're so important. People vote with their feet, so it is important to capture maybe from that first one, weekly, monthly, however often you're doing your project is rolling out. And then the other thing in terms of videoing, I think what's really important to flag up there is recognizing people's expertise in the generational group that they're supporting. So, for example, if I think about a project we ran in Torbay called Making Bridges with You, there was a lady in the care home that never, ever, just never smiled, ever. And on the second or the third session, I can't remember which it was, this lady smiled. Now, for me, coming in without that knowledge of that person, I had no idea how big a deal it was that this lady was smiling and laughing. So it's really important that you are respectful around the information that we hold about the participants for the generational group. And it's really important to be going to those members of staff and involving them as in the monitoring evaluation, because even if we'd had an independent observer, they would not have known how monumental that was for the difference it made to that person. And it might be a child, maybe sits still and reads to somebody for 10 minutes. Maybe that is absolutely unheard of, I'm going to say, or an older adult. So it is so important that as part of our planning process, when we're sitting down with all of our stakeholders and everybody that's involved, that we have that conversation, you know, how can I tap into the knowledge that you have about the group you're supporting? How can you share that? What is an easy way for you to capture that? You know, we don't want to be giving people tons and tons of questionnaires because people haven't got the time to do it. It needs to be quick and simple. Maybe they randomly choose 2 or 3 people in each session to focus their observations on, or maybe they choose somebody that they think is going to have a huge difference. And so on. So it's really important that we pass some of this evaluation out to the staff that are supporting that, because we don't have their knowledge, you know, and it's important that we flag that up. What other things have people used?
I think after each session we did in the care home, myself and the other practitioner who was in, we did a sit down and a chat. So it was a reflection, but with the activity coordinators who had been involved. And within that, we found when we went back for the next session, they also then shared back some of the reflection they'd gathered from staff after their first session. So I think it was protecting that time, that was a really important special time, because just when it was all really fresh, we could capture some of it, like you say, Lorraine, some of those things, like we had a chap who sat for an entire session, which was about 45 minutes, fully engaged, fully participating. And the staff had all commented that the longest he ever sits is when he's eating. He's generally 1 to 2 minutes maximum, and he has to be on the move. And he was so engaged in what we were doing and helping to lead it, helping to shape it. So again, we wouldn't have known that, but we captured some of that straight away from the staff who sat with us. But then there was even more fed back afterwards, because the staff who were working with this gentleman in his particular area of the care home were able to share how much more he was identifying some other activities that were happening to our time in the care home and what we did, and suggesting that they did some of the things that he had been involved in. What about if we did this, and what about if we did that? So it was, yeah, the reflection, that sort of protected time to come together after a session really became probably one of our most useful tools to sort of monitor and check what was going on and help us plan for the next session to come back in.
And I think that's really important in terms of protecting your time to have that session, because so often as soon as the session's finished, it's tidy up and moving on to something else. Whereas actually that 10 minutes really enables people to think, well, actually, what was the value in what we did today? What did we see? What did we notice? What changes and what impact took place? Anything else people would say that they've used, or they tend to prefer using something else? I mean, I mentioned, sorry, was somebody mentioned case studies, and Lorraine has included some really great case studies in the intergenerational storytelling toolkit. And case studies are a really good way of showing impact on specific individuals. And I would say a case study, along with individual observations of that person can really add depth to anything that's going on. And it might be that you're choosing a particular person for a specific reason, and that might link to your potential outcomes. So, for example, if we were looking at improving literacy and communication, for example, maybe we would focus on a child maybe that doesn't initiate conversations, and actually that child is going to be the case study that we write up. And as part of that, we've maybe got a member of staff or a volunteer counting how many conversations they initiate on the first day, and then maybe a session in the middle of the project, and then maybe at the end of the project, so that we can say they went from initiating nothing to maybe at the end of the project they were initiating conversations 17 times or whatever. So, you know, we can very cleverly think outside the box in terms of using other monitoring tools that will also substantiate and add depth to something that we're already doing, whether it's a piece of film or a case study. We also have things like baseline assessments. Excuse me. So as part of the primary school module, we've taken the baseline assessment that they're using on the Gold project at Stirling University, and we've tweaked it slightly because it was for an older age group. But what it does is it captures children's perceptions around engaging with older adults. So we have tweaked this for the primary school module, and the children complete it in week 1, and then they repeat it in week 6. And hopefully that will show us that maybe the language is much more positive when they're talking about older adults, or maybe they're viewing older adults instead of being tired and vulnerable. Maybe they're now using the word fun or friend. So, you know, so that exists, you know, and we can happily share that, but some sort of perception test. And don't forget, you know, when we're thinking about busting and challenging those stereotypes, that equally stereotypes older adults can have very stereotypical views of young people. So actually it's important that it's not just the children and the young people that we're measuring, but actually it might be the older adults, whether it's within a care home or a day centre, but actually what are their perceptions of the generation that they're going to engage with? You know, do they think that all teenagers, you know, don't initiate a conversation or all wear hoodies or hang around bus shelters? Is it quite a negative perception? And how does that change? So it's really important that we capture that for both generations or for all the groups that we're engaging. We also have the gingerbread activity, which we go through and we highlight in the one-day training. And that is really simple, where you're just asking, you provided a template of a gingerbread person, and you just ask people to draw something on them that would signify that they were a young person or an older adult. So if I was a teenager, I might be adding a walking stick or wrinkles or a flat cap and I'm being very stereotypical, or a buttoned up cardigan, comfy slippers. And then we ask them, we repeat that then at the end to see what has changed. Actually, has the stick gone? Because they've understood that the people that they've been engaging with, actually they haven't noticed the stick because they now see them as friends rather than people they didn't know. So the gingerbread activity is a really, really simple one to do, but it does give us that measurement around people's perceptions of different generations changing. And you can find that in the resources section of the GWT website. You can also have focus groups, and Lorraine was talking about having her reflection time at the end. Lorraine, do you want to just add something?
Yeah, you just, when you were talking about the gingerbread one, it also, I remember the first time I did that, and that was in a level 1 training day, how insightful it was to see what other adults present thought children would think, or younger people would think about older people. And in actual fact, it was a much harsher view than any young person I've ever come across at any point in time. And I think that was a really wonderful way to sort of open up a conversation and really explore about our own biases and what are we bringing to what we think others will think in the first place. And certainly when I was down in Jedburgh, you know, trying to get an idea of what the young children thought about these older people that they were going to meet. And there was a question asked around, what do you think they can't do? And we were waiting for a number of things to come back. And actually there was complete silence and a lot of, you know, looking at each other, head scratching. And then one young child who was primary one had said, I think they can't do the splits. And I just thought, how magic is that? You know, like straight away, a whole load of these worries and feels about, you know, oh, they're going to see this ancient tribe of people and think, you know, they're terribly old and can't manage, etc. And it was just blown out the water. So I think the activities can be brilliant to actually see that it's our thoughts about other people's perceptions that we are working off of rather than the real deal in a sense. So I think it's a fun exercise to do, but a really enlightening one. So I think that was really a really super,
Yeah,
it just sprung back to mind, so I thought I'd share that.
No, and you can also use the gingerbread men, the gingerbread activity. You can ask a young child to pretend they're an older person and draw what do older people think of younger people. And as Lorraine just said, they tend to be far harsher than we are actually in reality. But it is important, you know, and Lorraine said around how do we explore our own biases in this. You know, when we start planning our intergenerational program, you know, are we making the assumption that something will change or that something will happen? You know, so it could be that actually the evidence you collect disproves the assumption that you felt, which is always interesting. And without collecting that evidence, you may have a very skewed view maybe of a community or how people will take engagement. On top of reflection groups, I would also sort of say things like specific focused groups, or even just asking for a group of a stakeholder from each of the groups, so that you can have a mini group that represents all of the stakeholders, you know. And even if, you know, you've got one at the beginning, one in the middle, and then one at the end, how are people feeling, you know, that it's going? Is it as enjoyable as it looks, or actually is it something that they feel is not what it should be? And if we have a representative from all of the stakeholders, you'll then get a much more honest opinion of what's taking place. I think the other thing that's really important in terms of because we're focused on relationships, and relationships are best captured through narrative like case studies or interviews, that it is really nice to be creative and using filming, as Belan said they did, and then securing that time to go through that film footage to see actually what is it demonstrating. The other thing that works really well are photographs that support observations. There is, I don't know if anybody has heard of Tom Drummond learning stories, and you can just Google Tom Drummond's learning stories. But Tom Drummond is just extends what is quite a traditional approach in terms of observations that we use in early years, by adding in other people's perceptions. And he then takes the observation that he's made, he adds in other people's perceptions around what has taken place, and then he goes back to that person and shares it, and then records their reflections on what has taken place. And there are some really lovely stories. There's one called Josie's Drip, which really just flags up how this type of observation, engaging other and capturing other people's impressions, really add depth to children's learning and understanding of what's taking place. So I really recommend that you have a Google of Tom Drummond. We've also got things like capturing anecdotal feedback. And again, that could just be a volunteer's job. It could be a member of staff. If you haven't got a volunteer or a spare member of staff, it could be that you just provide post-its and you just ask people to write maybe 3 words that sum up this session for them, you know, or 2 or 1, and they just put their feedback on a post-it at the end of the session, you know, and hopefully you'll get things like fun, you know, rather than rubbish, you know, if you're working with children and young people. But whatever feedback comes back, it's all equally valuable to you as the person that's facilitating this and trying to make sure that you're still on track with what you're aiming for. You also, in terms of trying to be creative around how do we get data out of people's relationships, there are the Leuven scales. And again, the Leuven scales is primarily an early years tool that we use, and it focuses on capturing engagement and well-being. And you can just Google the Leuven scale and you can download it. It comes on a scale of 1 to 5. So for example, if I was working with children in primary school and one of the children was completely disengaged and actually just wouldn't even come in the room, you know, they would actually score a 1, totally disengaged. But actually by maybe the end of term, and this child is running up the driveway to come into the care home or to the day centre, you know, and he's made a friend, and he's just so much language, and he's sharing his friendship with his parents, you know, that then would give me a reading of 5. So it enables us to focus on 2 things: engagement and well-being. What difference is your project making? And often with intergenerational work, engagement and well-being are the things we need to prove because we're maybe trying to reduce loneliness. So actually, if you're collecting data around engagement, that then supports your statement that this project has had a positive impact on loneliness, for example. And you can use the Leuven scales for any age of children. And there is an adult version. It's called the ARTS, ARTS/OBS, OBS, the ARTS OBS scale. And the ARTS OBS scale originally was used in hospitals to focus and measure patient engagement and well-being. You know, were patients maybe really engaged? Had they been in hospital for a really long time? Maybe there was depression, and what interventions could be put in place that would make a difference for that person. But the ARTS OBS scale again focuses on well-being and engagement. So straight away we've got 2 tools that we can compare the results for the 2 different generations. So and then enables us to create data around comparisons. You know, maybe this had a better impact upon the children than it did upon the older adults, or it was less so with the teenagers, but more so with a different age group, and so on. So the Leuven scales and the ARTS OBS are great tools and very simple, and you can just Google them and download the 1 to 5 scales. You don't have to purchase them.
Can I butt in, Lorraine?
Yeah, of course.
Again, you've just flagged something up for me that I think is really important. Pre-COVID, I met an early years practitioner from local nursery, and they've had a long history in this nursery of visiting the local day centre. They didn't call it intergenerational work. They didn't share it with anybody. They didn't record anything. But when I was chatting to this nursery worker, she was telling me about a little girl whose mum had come and approached them, and she wondering who was Alison, who was the other child, because she wanted to invite Alison to a play date because she was so thrilled that her daughter, who was very shy, quite withdrawn, very reticent, had got excited and was asking on certain days, will Alison be there? Well, is this an Alison day? And when they had said, totally baffled, we don't have an Alison, they had then started to put the pieces together and realised Alison was one of the ladies at the day centre. And that was her special friend. And then they shared back to Mum about just how excited these two individuals were on their days for coming together. And Mum had been really emotional and then had started to make more of a connection with the day centre as well. On the other side of it, at the day centre, Alison, the lady in question, had become increasingly non-communicative, non-engaged. Her friend had been ill and had passed away, and she was attending the day centre, but less and less as a sort of cheery, engaged participant, apart from when this little girl came in. So she liked to sort of see the other children, but she wasn't involved with them. But this little girl would shoot straight in after they'd got to know each other. She'd jump up, she'd be up on the chair beside her, they'd do stories, they'd do finger rhymes and all sorts of things, and all the things that this lovely Alison had remembered doing with her grandchildren, her children, etc. And they just had the most precious bond. And bit by bit, the staff could see Alison lifting back out of what was clearly quite a dense depression, you know, quite a reactive grief from losing her friend, who had been her friend her whole life. And this little girl was the one that was bringing it up. And of course, in the nursery, it would have had a short lifespan. The little girl would have moved on to school, and school wasn't engaged. But because it connected through the family as well, they were able to keep the connection, and it actually grew. None of it was recorded. None of it was shared. It was just, in itself, it was just fantastic. And of course, all the other children were having this ongoing relationships. It was marvellous. But just said, if you could capture that, they didn't need any funding to make this still happen. They managed to make it happen. It was an embedded piece of work. But sharing it and sharing the case study from that, or, you know, some other sets of information would have helped probably somewhere else get started. And I remember logging that, just thinking, we need to hear more about what you're doing. These little snippets of magic across the board, it was great, but some things just jump out at you and they can inspire others to get involved and see those connections. And I just thought it was incredibly precious. They do an awful lot of intergenerational work at the Day Centre, and it's really fabulous stuff. And I'm still trying to encourage them to sign up to GWT and share what they're doing, because it's wonderful practice that they have. But you know, that just really stood out to me when you were speaking about, you know, where do you measure that? If we'd done that on those scales, it would have gone through the roof. They would have gone from zero to hero, in a sense, you know, like it would have been, we couldn't get any better than this. This is just wonderful. But it wasn't captured, so it couldn't be shared anywhere else. It was just a chance conversation that I know about it. So I think that's it. I think it's like continuing to say to people, please do share what you're doing, whatever way you can, and notice these things and record them, because they are really, really special.
Yeah, and you raise a really important point, Lorraine, around, you know, if we're going to monitor and evaluate and not share it, what's the point? You know, we need to share, and we need to share it as widely as possible. So not only within our own organisation or our partner's organisation, you know, but can we get something in the paper? Can we share something in community newsletters? You know, can we be, if we've done our monitoring and evaluation right, what focused things can we show? Excuse me. Because then we can then maybe approach the local authority, you know, or the chain of care homes, maybe if you're one of a chain, in terms of this is the difference this is making, and it's documented and it's gathered, and I've got this evidence to support it, rather than it just being something that's perceived as a nice thing to do. You know, we can use and should use intergenerational work as a targeted approach. And the more we capture and record and share our evaluations, the more this will happen. But at the moment, we're just not terribly confident in doing that. And that's such a great story. And it's really sad that you know, Loreen didn't read about it in the paper with everybody else in the community. So we need to make sure we share it. I think the other thing really is we also need to remember things like the Kaplan levels as tools that we can use, you know, as reflective tools. So not only do we have the Kaplan levels with those different levels of engagement, we can actually use them as where do we want to be as aspirational tools. We can also think, well, actually, I think we're maybe at a level 3, but maybe then with your evaluation, actually, does that show that you're on a different level? So the Kaplan levels are such a good tool to use in terms of planning, but also in monitoring and evaluation. And alongside the Kaplan levels, I would certainly be saying to people, you know, find out what the quality standards are, because, you know, there could be a really key one that you're missing, or maybe it shows if you're discussing them in your initial stages, you know, it then provides you with an opportunity to think about how are we going to make this inclusive. If, you know, if it's a group coming to do to another group, rather than the participants being involved in shaping whatever it is they want to learn from or share with somebody else, how inclusive is that? So the quality standards, you know, exist. And next year in 2023, there's going to be an international focus on quality standards. And what we're hoping to do, working in partnership with other countries, is come up with a universal set of quality standards so that for me, as an early years practitioner, I will know what quality looks like in early years. For somebody who's doing intergenerational work in youth work or in education or in their care home in adult social care, we can have much more in-depth conversations around what does quality look like in those fields. So next year will be really interesting in terms of flagging up the quality standards, and it's another reason why we've linked the Excellence Awards to the quality standards this year, so people start having conversations about them. I think lastly as well, I would really encourage people to build stakeholder maps so that you map out who's involved in your project and what are the tasks that you're going to, what tasks are they happy to be involved in, you know, in terms of your monitoring and evaluation. So how are you going to involve your children and young people? How are you going to involve your older adults? How are you going to involve your staff on either side, you know, with whichever group they're supporting? Have you got volunteers? Can you involve somebody with a local authority or somebody higher up in your management, so that they can see for themselves the difference that whatever you're delivering is having? So we need to have a really good stakeholder map. We need to then think about what's our aim, what's our outcome? You know, what is it you're hoping to achieve? And our outcome usually has a word to do with change in it. So is it reduce, improve, increase? And then you're going to then have activities that link to the outcome. So it could be that you're going to reduce loneliness, and the way in which you're going to do that is you're going to you're going to create an intergenerational project, maybe in a day centre, where isolated adults from the community are transported to on a Wednesday morning. So you've got your aim, you've got your activities that are linked to your aim, and then you need to think about what are your indicators that will show that this is what's happening. So your indicators again would be things like your attendance. You know, are more important, more people coming? Actually, do you need now to find a second bus because there's so many people that want to come? So you need to decide in your planning stage what your indicators are. Is it attendance? Is it your baseline assessment? Are you going to see an improvement? Are you using a questionnaire for your volunteers? You know, do they all want to continue volunteering? So you need to decide what your key indicators are that show whether your aim has been met. And then your monitoring and evaluation tools then need to fit in alongside that. How does that sound to people as a as a process. I'm mindful I'm doing a lot of talking. Does that sound doable, achievable? What challenges do people think they may have? So if you're going back to your intergenerational partners tomorrow to say, you know, we need to be thinking about monitoring and evaluation, what challenges do you think you may have?
Quite often, what we get a lot of here is people, when they do go to do some sort of intergenerational, they kind of see, I mean, this is just intergenerational, and they say it's intergenerational. And it kind of is, but it's not, if they're not doing it kind of long term and stuff. So it's kind of, I find that sometimes getting that message across is quite, it takes time. But once they see and they kind of do it, I mean, even for over 2 or 3 months, it certainly makes a difference, and it's a whole different perspective looking at intergenerational work.
I think that's a really good point, because everybody starts their intergenerational journey at a different place. And I mean, I would never say to somebody what you're doing is not intergenerational. But what I would do is possibly give them the Kaplan levels and the quality standards and say, you know, are you aware of these tools? This shows many people's starting points. You know, how can I support you to be aspirational? Have you thought about how you could embed inclusion, for example, or monitoring and evaluation? So I think it's really important. You know, we want more and more people to develop intergenerational work. And as part of that process, people come into it at the level which they're at, you know, and it's around meeting them where they are and supporting them in terms of reflection, maybe buddying them up with somebody else in the community. And that's why the GWT networks are so important, because you can meet like-minded colleagues in your own community, maybe that are looking for a partner or have been doing this for a couple of years and are quite happy to support you, you know, and share what they've learned. And I think, you know, I've always found coming into intergenerational work, everybody shares so much. I think it's a wonderful field to be in, because everybody just shares. Nobody is, well, I've never had an experience where somebody has said, I've got this amazing tool, but I'm not going to tell you about it. Everybody just generally says, well, we use this. This is where you can find it, or I'll send it to you. What other challenges do people think they may find?
I think possibly the most common one is people feeling they have enough time over and above the actual session or the planning for the session to come back to that monitoring and evaluation and sort of coming together and sharing that. It's one of those tricky things. Once you've started it and you've got it established, nobody wants to give it up. But getting it started, people feel like, oh, you need more time. Oh, right. And then that can feel like the sticky bit, the bit that's not fun. But I think, again, in reality, when you really start to share what's being observed and what's being seen, it's a really energizing session. Usually it's usually really positive, and people go away feeling even better than they did after the activity, because you do get to reflect on things that are good. And when you realize maybe you're going off down a different strand, as a group, you've got a chance to say, well, is this the right way to go? Are we now making a modification because this is where everybody seems to have most energy, most interest? This is where the relationships are growing stronger and not quite what we first thought. And then you can think, all right, I'm not alone. Other people have seen that too, and let's do that. And so you put your energy into something that's really beneficial and really working. But it can feel like the stodgy thing. It can feel a bit intimidating, and also just, where do we find more time to do it?
And I think that's why, if we can discuss it right from the off, and we can divvy up the tasks, and we can make them fun, so that they fall within the session. So you're not asking anybody to complete a 10-minute questionnaire at the end of everything. But if we can make it so that it really links into people's skills, it really then validates the participants and the supporters of the project in terms of this is the difference that this is making by them being there. And I think that validation is really important. And if I'm involved as part of the monitoring and evaluation, that really gives me that additional role as well. So I'm not just, it's not being done to me. Actually, I'm taking an active role in feeding back how that feels, or I may be observing somebody else at how that feels for them. So I think it is important, you know, and I think we can go to older adults and we can go to young people, you know, and children and say, what do you think you would be good at in monitoring and evaluation? You know, filming a project would be great for maybe for young people. You know, organising buttons or pebbles would be great for early years. So we need to really make it relevant to the groups that we've got, and make it really fun so that people then don't see it as an add-on to something else that they've already got to do. Because if we're working within education or adult social care, nobody's got the time for the add-ons. Everybody is already busy. So it's important that we make these things happen in and around the session as best we can, and that they're really fun. I've got a couple of next steps. Let me just share my last slide. So where do we go really from here? I'm going to, and I know I've already mentioned it, but I'm going to really emphasize, do go and find the online module on measuring the impact of measuring the impact of intergenerational work. If you go to the GWT website, click on the training page, and then click in the menu on the left-hand side on the online modules, there are 5, and the monitoring and evaluation, the measurement one, is excellent, and it offers a whole range of different tools that you'll be able to use, copy, tweak, that you can then run with and think, actually, these are really appropriate, maybe to something I'm planning or running at the moment. There is also, and I will send it out, the Generations United Evaluation Toolkit. So Generations United is the equivalent, I guess, of GWT, but in America. And they share everything. They have the most amazing resource library. And if you just Google Generations United, and again, I'll send the link out, they have a great monitoring and evaluation toolkit. So you don't even have to reinvent the wheel. You can literally, they just have different baseline things that you can just copy and print. So I'll send that out, and there's so much really creative as well it is in terms of just trying to think of things that are really fun. You also need to have that conversation when you're discussing monitoring evaluation as to what tools are going to be best for your participants and your project. You know, if you're working maybe on something that's really around inclusion, maybe the bulk of your group maybe are adults with dementia or Alzheimer's disease. Actually, what tools might be best for that group? If, you know, are they going to be able to, do they have capacity to capture something in terms of something at the end of the session, or can somebody just note down any feedback or comments that the adults make during the session? So it's really important that we choose tools that fit and that are appropriate and suit the participants that we're going to be working with. We also need to think about training, you know, at that initial stage of planning. We then need to be having that conversation, and you can say to your volunteers, you know, can you go on the website, like I say, it's free if you're in Scotland, can you just complete that monitoring and evaluation? And as a volunteer working in an intergenerational project, it would be really useful for me to have that wider understanding about what your expectations are for me in being part of this process, and involve everyone, make it really fun. Don't leave it to the end. If you've left it to the end, you've lost so many opportunities to capture some of that magic that happens, and that incredible impact that happens. And then don't forget to share whatever results you have, share them more widely. You know, if you're going to write a case study, share it with GWT. We'll happily add it to the website. You know, so do something with the evaluation and the monitoring that you can create. You know, and we're always happy to share everything. And if you haven't had a look, excuse me, at the evaluation, if you haven't had a look in the resource section, do have a look. There are some really great case studies. You know, and some of them you can just put in early years children, or care homes, or isolated adults, or rural, and it will really flag up other things. Has anybody got any questions? Has this been a useful discussion?
Yeah, this has been so useful. It's just been really good to see how I can plan for the next year, like moving forward, and all the different ways that I think I've been monitoring, but just like in an informal way. So
Yeah.
so that's good. It's good to know that I'm doing it already. I just need to formalize it a bit more. So yeah, thank you so much.
Name it and share it, Megan. I mean, I'm going to send out from here. I'll write up some minutes. I'll also add the recording to the website, and I'll email everybody that had booked onto the session, and I'll include some of those links. Ideally as well, what I'll also put in the email is what other things do people want to discuss? Because I don't want to come here and do to the Care Home Network. I'm really keen to hear what other people want to talk about or explore with other people. So do have a think about, you know, things that you would find really useful to discuss, and just ping me an email and let me know. And ideally, it would be lovely to get out, and we have 3 network meetings a year, generally 2 online and 1 face-to-face, you know, so it would be great for somebody to say, you know, I can offer a venue, or I can host it, or equally, if you think, you know, that you're working with a good group of partners, you know, and you want me to bring and deliver the 1-day intergenerational course there, ping me an email and let me know. I don't want to decide these things. I'd rather be going, you know, where people have said, come and visit. So thank you. I'm so pleased to meet you. And it's such a shame other people, stuff happens, and you know, and we haven't had such a bigger group as we normally do. But if you have any queries from this, you've got my email address. Just, yeah, contact me, and join your networks if you're not in your networks already, and you'll meet the lovely Loreen then as well.
Yeah, if you're through my side.
Oh, well, it's been very lovely to meet everybody. Take care, and I'll send this all out. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Lorraine. Rest your throat.
I will. Bye.
Bye.